Today, we get to continue our series going through the entire Bible to get into the overarching God's big story. Today, you're going to hear one of the most important phrases in the entire Bible. And I just want to jump in because the sooner we do that, the sooner we get to that phrase, one of the most important phrases. So let me read with you. We're going to just jump into to the 39th chapter of Genesis and talk about Joseph. Let me read the first verse 1 out of chapter 39. When Joseph was taken to Egypt by the Ishmaelite traders, he was purchased by Potiphar, an Egyptian officer. Potiphar was the captain of the guard for Pharaoh, the king of Egypt. And that sounds like that's an abrupt jumping in. And you're saying, well, how did you get there? And some of you guys know the story of Joseph, and you're saying, well, I got it. But some of you are going, I'm a little fuzzy on this. Joseph is the 11th son of Jacob. Imagine 11, the 10 sons before you. And in case you're wondering, we talked about Abram last week. Abraham, his son was Isaac, and Isaac's son was Jacob. Joseph is the 11th son of Jacob. And like all middle children, any middle children in the house, you're saying, well, I'm looked over, or I'm overlooked, and all these other benefits go to everybody else. And am I the only one thinking middle child stuff? But that's not the story of Joseph. He's the middle child, but he's the favorite child. He was like the one that Dad was waiting for. Say, oh, my son Joseph. Oh, yeah, I got 10 other ones, but I've been waiting for Joseph. And then there was Benjamin, but Joseph, he was the favorite child. He was shown favoritism by Jacob, his dad. He gave him the nice coat, and we call it the coat of many colors. The Bible calls it many colors because it wasn't just a drab type of clothing that everybody else got. This was expensive. This was some money going on him to show he was the favorite. And anytime you have a family that shows favoritism to one child over the others, you have a lot of hatred that comes your way. Joseph was despised by his brothers. And then so much so, they sold him to some Ishmaelite traders that were going to Egypt with him. And that's how you get to where he was sold as a slave into Egypt. But it doesn't stop there. God's not done with Joseph yet. Let me read more. Verse 2. The Lord was with Joseph. So he succeeded in everything he did as he served in the home of the Egyptian master. Potiphar noticed this and realized that the Lord was with Joseph, giving him success in everything he did. This pleased Potiphar, so he soon made Joseph his personal attendant. He put him in charge of his entire household, everything he owned. And from that day, Joseph was put in charge of his master's household and property. The Lord began to bless Potiphar's household for Joseph's sake. That's a great start. And you heard it too. The Lord was with Joseph and things prospered. It was great. But that's not the end of the story for Joseph, because it takes a turn. Joseph, okay, I'm in the house. I'm in this big house. This is an important person. Things are going well. And it didn't stay going well. Because inside of the house is let's just put it nicely, she's kind of a brazen hussy. I don't know the best way to look at this, but you guys get the idea. She thinks she's the queen of hooking up or something like that. But Potiphar's wife is not faithful to Potiphar. And she's looking at Joseph as her conquest. And God was with Joseph. Joseph said, no, this isn't possible. No, stop it. No. But she didn't give up, and soon, what's the phrase? Hell hath no fury as a woman scorned. And she accuses him of being untoward, of being disrespectful, of trying to take advantage of her. And Potiphar takes her side. And from there he goes to prison. Yeah, do not pass go, do not collect $200, go directly to jail. But that's not the end of the story either. It's important to grab a hold of that. God was with Joseph, and that's not the end of the story. Let me read you a little bit more. Potiphar was furious, as every man would be furious if they believed the story. He was furious when he heard his wife's story about how Joseph had treated her. So he took Joseph and threw him into prison where the king's prisoners were held, and there he remained. You hear the phrase again. But the Lord was with Joseph in the prison and showed him his faithful love, and the Lord made Joseph a favorite with the prison warden. Before long, the warden put Joseph in charge of all the other prisoners and over everything that happened in the prison. The warden had no more worries because Joseph took care of everything. And here's your phrase for the morning. The Lord was with him and caused everything he did to succeed. One of the most important phrases of the Bible is the Lord was with him. And you might be saying, well, what does that mean? What is it in your life? What does it mean that the Lord is with you? That's where we want to be. What does that mean? Here, let me give you a bigger idea on it. What does that mean? God's people live in God's presence. If the Lord is with you, you are in God's presence. And that's all that matters. Let me give you a couple ideas on how do you know that you're in God's presence? How do you know that you're living in God's presence, that the Lord is with you? Your focus is not just on everything around you. It's spiritual as well. You did know that there is the physical world that we have, but there is a spiritual world. Do we understand that, right? We live with a foot in both worlds, the spiritual and the physical. And they are both just as real as the other. And if you follow our normal person you meet on the street, they'll say, no, there's only the physical. I can only prove the physical. That's where we live. Everything else is a delusion. The Lord is with his people when they are in his presence, and it is physical and spiritual at the same time. Now that we look at people spiritually now, they don't know Jesus yet. They have all this trouble in their life because spiritually they're a wreck. They don't know the hope of their life. That's Jesus. So I spent a little bit more time on that than I wanted. But you focus on the spiritual, but also God is the center of your life. The very center. And this is the toughest part for us. To live in God's presence means to make him the focus. Make his way the way that we go. And this is a battle of your will every day. To say, am I going to follow God's way? I'm living in his presence. I'm living that God is with me. I want to do what he's called me to do. Here's your test. Why did you come to church this morning? Or maybe why are you watching, tuning in on the live stream? Why did we come? Oh man, I wanted to see Michael. He was like, no, it's guitar. Yeah, I love that. Or maybe you had some friends to see. Or maybe you said, I want to come here and worship my God with other people who know him too. Maybe you said, I want to come here the words of God resonate in my heart. Not just the words of this pastor speaking, but may God work through those words to resonate in my heart, because I need His words more than I need anything else. It has to do with, is God the center of your life? The Lord is with him. We live in His presence. Are we following His way? There's one other kind of test on, say, am I living in God's presence? Is God's way the best? Do I look for His plan? Am I looking at all of my life saying, you know what, I want to see what my God will do in my life? We talk about Romans 8:28 here all the time. For we know that in all things God works. That God works. Do we look for His plan? See, people that are living in God's presence, that they look for His way. God, what do you have for me today? I want to do your will. Now, those are the things that we have to wrestle with. This is kind of a funny thing for me, only because it's so serious. Do we really want to live in God's presence? In the serious way here, because I'm sure that we do. Some of us will look at it as like having a pet at the house. And anybody who's got a dog at the house, you know that sometimes it is the best thing in the world. You've had the most terrible day, and the dog runs up to you, and they are still happy to see you. Of all the things in this world that could be going wrong, that dog thinks you are awesome. At least that's my dog. Maybe you have a dog that's like pure evil and just doesn't pay attention to you. But most dogs are going to come up and they're just wonderful to you and say, yeah, let me lick your face a little bit. You want to play? Let's play. And then it's wonderful. But we treat it like, okay, good. I got my good thing. I feel good about myself. All right, dog, you can go away now. I'm going to go on with my day. And we treat God that way. And His presence. We say, oh, I love to be in your presence, God. And especially at church. I worship you. This is awesome. All right, now you can go away. I'm going to go on with my life. And we don't want to live in God's presence. We want Him to say, oh, I'm with you. But I want to do some things my own way. Just stay over there. It's fine. We're good. I'll come back to you when I really need to feel good about myself. Do you want to live in God's presence? Because I'm not sure we always do it. It's something that we need to say all the time. God, forgive me because I have put you off to the side. And I didn't want to be aware that you were with me the whole day. I didn't want to be aware of it. I knew you were there, but I didn't want to pay attention to you. Can you stay over there? The mission statement for this church is to know and to grow and to serve and to share. To know Christ, to grow in faith. To share God's love, to serve those around us. It is impossible to know and to grow if you're not in His presence. The reasons why you serve and share are all twisted and corrupted if you're not doing it in His presence. So we always ask that, do we want to be in God's presence? Because God's people live in God's presence, and that is the most important thing that matters in your life. That's a tough thing to keep in your mind all the time. You might have some people that say, well, can God rescue me from every bad situation? Then I would love to be in His presence. Because I got some crazy stuff going on in my life. I'd love to be out of it. Can God change me in this situation to make it all good? Well, sometimes He does. Is His timing the same as mine? Because I'll love His plan and be in His presence and seek His plan if it goes the way I would like it to do. Does it do that? And no, it's usually not the same. God's timing is so much different than ours. What is His definition of good? If I'm in His presence, does His definition of a good thing the same as mine? Oh, most of the time not. What we think is good or what feels good is He's going, wait a minute, what are you doing? So some people say, what's the benefit of being in God's presence? What's the benefit to me that God is with me? Ain't that a good question? What's the benefit to me? Because our God takes bad situations and makes them into beneficial ones. Because you're always going to find yourself in a bad situation. You're like a Joseph. Sometimes it's just going to be really bad. Because God doesn't always remove us from our bad situations. He didn't take Joseph out of his. Sometimes He richly blesses us and turns them into beneficial situations for other people. Soak in what just happened with Joseph, all right? Just let this soak in. Joseph, he's the favorite son. He's way up there. He's riding high. He's got this coat of many colors. He's awesome. This life is great. And all of a sudden, brothers turn against him. He becomes a slave. He becomes a slave, which means everything in your life is no longer yours. You belong to somebody else. You are property. And you're thinking, all right, he's living in God's presence. God's going to make this all turn out good, right? And things are going to work out well. Well, this is what happens. God didn't take him out of the situation. It goes quite the opposite. It turns worse. He sends him to prison. You were just a slave once, but now I'm going to send you to prison. God, what are you thinking here? The big picture here is this: I was in a bad situation, you made it worse. And sometimes it feels like that for us. I got a bad place I'm at right now, and now it's compounding worse. I can get specific on lots of different situations that I know of that they started off bad and now they're even worse because they want to do what's right with God. And now they're just terrible. And you start screaming, God, what are you up to? I want to be in your presence. What are you doing? I wish we could jump in to the full story of Joseph and talk about how Joseph was used by God to save it was a jump to say the world. But that entire region was going to have a famine. And God said, you know what? My people are in that region. Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, those people. These are my people. They are going to be threatened if there is a 7-year famine. I need to protect my people. And I'm going to be a blessing to other people as well. And I'm going to use Joseph to save a lot of people. Especially my own. Jacob and his whole family were able to go to Egypt and they were saved from the devastation of a famine, a 7-year famine, a devastating thing. God said, I'm going to save my people. I'm going to save a lot of people through Joseph because I am with him. Do we get that? God looks at you and says, you know what? I'm going to save a lot of people. I'm going to change a lot of lives because I am with you. I'm going to change some lives. Do you see yourself as that person? That God looks at you and says, I want to be with you. I want you to be in my presence all the time because I got great things I want to do with you. Imagine what you can do if God is with you. The lives changed. Let me go this one last part. What if? What if you could say, I know I am in God's presence all the time. And I want that. I want God to work through me. And you're saying, how do I do that? How do I stay in God's presence? Let me walk you through this, because this is where I want to end today. I want us to desire God's presence. I want us to, that is the only thing. If I have nothing else in this world, I want to stay in God's presence. And it comes down to three distinct prayers. It's just a sentence. And here's you're saying, I want to live in your presence, God. Show me your presence here. Here you go with the first one. God, make your presence personal. God, just make it personal to me. I want to know you. God is not some force out of Star Wars, some ethereal force or something that we're all a part of. Our God is separate. He's not bound by time and space and matter. He loves His people. He's not a part of a pantheon of gods that can't be bothered with people. He says, you matter to me. I want to be with you. As in right here, right in the chair next to you. He says, I want to be there personally. I want you to know how much I love you. I want you to be aware that I am near you and I care about you. I want to help guide you to change lives. I want to direct you so that you might thrive in this world. God, just make it personal for me. We're going to talk about Moses the next time. It was Moses who was talking with God. He says, God was saying, all right, I'm going to be with you, Moses. All these other people, they're a bunch of mule-headed people, not unlike us. I'm not going to be by them. I'm only going to be with you, Moses. Moses said, wait a minute, stop. If your presence does not go with us, do not send us from here. We need to be in your presence. We need it more than the air we breathe. How will all the other nations know that you are with us, that we're a special people? When we leave the doors, how does someone know that you are called by God, that God is with you? He says, I need to be in God's presence. God, would you make it personal so that I am aware of your presence, that I know that you're here? God, would you transform me with your presence? If we really desire God's presence among us, we can't help but be changed internally. You can't be that person and stay in sin and then stay in God's presence. It doesn't work that we are transformed. We're changed. What could possibly change 12 misfit fishermen and zealots and people that were just to the fringe of society? What could transform them so that they go out in this world and tell people about Jesus and die martyrs' deaths? What could possibly change that? They were in the presence of Jesus. Our God changed them, transformed them, so that it was no longer themselves. They were saying, God, use me, change me so that I might be a blessing to other people, that you might do great things through me. God, I need to be in your presence so that you might change my heart. Let me go one more. God, would you make this personal? Would you transform me? But would you also show me the joy of your presence? Do you know the joy of God's presence? That my day does not matter what happens, but I know it's going to be a great day every day because I am in God's presence. My dad used to always say this stuff. Oh, what type of day you got here? Oh, it's a great day. I always have a great day. Whether it's raining out or whether it's a not pleasant day at work, it is a great day. Because my God's always here. He's given me life. He said, you live in my presence. God's presence is always here and brings joy to your soul. It was King David. We read about it in Psalm 51, but King David had walked away from God's presence. Ever since Bathsheba, and he said, oh, you're really pleasing. You're not my wife, but you're pleasing to me. He walked away from God's presence. And in Psalm 51, it says this. I'll just read a little bit to you. He says, don't cast me from your presence, even though he walked away from it. Don't cast me from your presence or take your Holy Spirit from me. I need to be in your presence. Because he goes on, restore to me the joy of your salvation. There's the joy being in God's presence, no matter what's going on. You look at some people that you're saying, how can you be happy about anything going on in your world? The phrases that kind of I grab a hold of so deeply. There's no better place to be than where God has called you to be. And there's no better thing to do than what God has called you to do. You're saying, well, those are kind of nice, I guess. But they all come together in God's presence. When you are in God's presence, wherever you are, that is where He's called you to be. You have to be in His presence. That's where I want you to be. Don't run away from me and go do some fun things. Or even say, I'm working for God, I'm over there. No, God has called you to be with Him. You don't leave His presence to go do great works for Him. You always take His presence with you and do those great things because that's what He's called you to do. And so you're always there in His presence. God's perfect plan is that you might be in His presence, that you might know that the Lord is with you. You know, whatever you do in God's presence, that's the best path for you. You know, sometimes you get these college students saying, man, what's my path? Where am I supposed to go? Where you're supposed to go is to be in God's presence. Well, what am I supposed to do? Whatever He's called you to do, when you're in His presence, that's what He's called you to do. That's the best thing you can do. That's the best place you can do. Well, I don't know and understand exactly what that is. Start with God's presence. And then the next step is whatever opportunity He gives. Yep, He's going to be right there too. I'm going to be in His presence doing what He's called me to do. Dig ditches, sell cars, raise kids, bake cakes, live as a missionary in Mozambique. Whatever you do, do it in God's presence, knowing that God is with you. So God, make your presence personal. Transform us in your presence. And restore to us the joy that comes from being in your presence. Here, pray with me. God, you have blessed us with your words today, with your presence. God, we ask that you might apply it to our hearts. Show us your presence today and the days to come. Even if we're watching football today, make us aware that we are always in your presence. We love you, God. Amen.